New York City has fallen. General Sir William Howe's 1776 offensive strengthened the British Crown's grip on the American colonies. A series of punishing blows have nearly destroyed the Continental Army. These dark moments for the Americans at the end of 1776 were truly the times that try men's souls. Then came hope. Surprising American victories under General George Washington at Trenton and Princeton. The Patriot cause remained very much alive at the outset of 1777. Great Britain would unleash a new campaign to end the war. The aim is to isolate New England and destroy the nest of the rebellion. Controlling the waterways of Lake Champlain, south to the Hudson River, will effectively cut off New England from the other colonies. General John Burgoyne will lead approximately 9,500 British and Hessian soldiers south from Canada. First, he will capture Fort Ticonderoga, and then push on to Albany and the Hudson River. Lieutenant Colonel Barry St. Leger will command a force of roughly 2,000 and will march from Lake Ontario down the Mohawk Valley towards a junction with Burgoyne at Albany, where the Mohawk River meets the Hudson. From the south, Howe and elements of his army in New York City will press north to support Burgoyne, hopefully catching the American army in the north in a giant pincer action. Determined to overcome all odds, Burgoyne declares to his troops on June 30th that neither difficulty, nor labor, nor life are to be regarded. This army must not retreat. Burgoyne's army advances along Lake Champlain. Its first target is Fort Ticonderoga. American leadership believed Ticonderoga to be nearly impregnable, but the British easily capture the high ground of Mount Defiance, dragging their guns along with them. On July 5th, with British artillery bearing down on the defending Americans, General Arthur St. Clair orders Fort Ticonderoga abandoned. Burgoyne's swift victory fills him with confidence. But just as soon as circumstances appeared favorable, Burgoyne's troops encountered a series of setbacks that would have grave consequences for the campaign. British troops giving chase to American forces retreating into Vermont suffer significant casualties at the Battle of Hubbardton. Meanwhile, Burgoyne's progress south to Albany halts. The Americans are felling large trees across the Skenesboro Trail, and their scorched earth tactics prevent Burgoyne from gaining supplies from the region. As the British Army exhausts itself, clearing obstacles and building a new road, the American forces continue to gather and strengthen. On August 3rd, Burgoyne receives a letter from General Howe stating that the army in New York is not headed up the Hudson to reinforce Burgoyne, but rather is bound for the rebel capital at Philadelphia. The professional discretion given Howe now appears to be a devastating mistake. To the west, St. Leger advances on and besieges the American force at Fort Stanwix. Breaking off to confront an American relief column, St. Leger's forces fight in the bloody and indecisive Battle of Oriskany. All the while, a detachment of Burgoyne's army on a foraging expedition faces stiff American resistance, and Burgoyne loses 900 men in the Battle of Bennington. Back in the west, St. Leger returns to Fort Stanwix and learns that his disillusioned indigenous allies are determined to return to their homes. With his force significantly reduced and a second Patriot column headed his way, St. Leger is forced to give up the siege of Fort Stanwix and retreat. The British plan is unraveling quickly. As Burgoyne moves down the banks of the Hudson River, American General Horatio Gates revitalizes the Northern Department. In the middle of September, he placed his army, now 15,000 men strong, along Bemis Heights, 3 miles north of Stillwater. Under the watchful eye of Polish engineer Thaddeus Kosciuszko, the men dig in and await the British advance. On September 19th, Burgoyne ordered a reconnaissance in force against the American lines. His army moved south in 3 wings, with General Simon Fraser on the right, James Hamilton in the center, and Baron von Riedesel on the left along the river road. Receiving word of the British movement, Wing Commander Benedict Arnold and Colonel Daniel Morgan convinced Gates to advance a force to confront Burgoyne and to prevent the British forces from flanking Gates's position. The Battle of Saratoga has begun. The 2 armies collide in the open farm fields of John Freeman. A vicious back-and-forth fight ensues as both sides feed more troops into the maelstrom. General Hamilton's men bear the brunt of the fighting. Near sunset, Riedesel's column arrives on the American right, forcing the Americans to withdraw to Bemis Heights. The British hold the field, but suffer 600 casualties, nearly 10% of Burgoyne's army. Burgoyne fails in his first effort to clear the road to Albany. Following the fighting at Freeman's farm, the British build redoubts on the captured ground. A stalemate ensues for 2.5 weeks. In early October, Burgoyne's army runs dangerously low on supplies and must act. On October 7th, he orders another reconnaissance in force towards Bemis Heights and the American left flank. At noon, the British advance. Burgoyne's force pushes south and forms a line extending from the Freeman farm west across the Barber wheat field. Gates responds by sending Morgan and the left wing to attack. The American line rolls up the British right. In the wheat field, General Simon Fraser attempts to rally the men but is mortally wounded by a sharpshooter's ball. The tide of battle turns. Benedict Arnold, with permission from General Gates, rides into the fury and leads subsequent thrusts against the Bremen and Balcarres redoubts. Balcarres holds, but the Americans overrun Bremen's redoubt. Arnold's leg is seriously wounded, but he urges the victorious Patriots onward. Burgoyne pulls his army back to the Great Redoubt along the Hudson River to ponder his next move. Burgoyne's army, whittled down by sickness, desertion, and more than 1,000 battlefield casualties, is now outnumbered 3-1 by the ever-expanding American forces. On October 8th, Burgoyne begins a miserable and rainy retreat to the town of Saratoga. 3 days later, Gates surrounds Burgoyne's army. Burgoyne calls a council of war and decides that his best option is to surrender to the Americans. On October 17, 1777, as the British drummers beat out the Grenadiers' March and the American band played Yankee Doodle, Burgoyne, in his full dress uniform, surrendered his sword and his army to Gates. The victory at Saratoga was a true turning point of the war. It was a true setback for the stunned British. It also convinced King Louis XVI of France to enter the war on the Patriot side. America was now on the path to independence. But rooting out the British, who now focused their eyes on America's southern colonies, would prove to be a years-long undertaking.